Richard was 82 years old. He lived with his wife in an assisted living center. Every morning, Richard would come to the lobby, open the newspaper, and read the obituaries. When asked why, he would always reply, "Well, I'm looking to see if I died and didn't know it." Richard has since passed on, but even up until the end of his life, he was happy. Unfortunately, there are many who do not feel happy later in life. Blanche often feels sad and alone. She would love to have someone take her to the temple so that she could feel like there was a purpose in her life again. Unfortunately, she has no one who will do that for her. She feels useless, unwanted, and lonely. For the past 3 years, my wife has worked at an assisted living center. Because of her experiences with the elderly, I have come to understand the loneliness that many of our elderly feel. President Thomas S. Monson, in a November 2008 ensign, said, "There are many who are lonely, including widows and widowers, who long for the companionship, for the company, and concern of others. Let us ever be mindful of their needs and be ready to extend a helping hand and loving heart." Today, let us become more mindful of the needs of the elderly who are lonely among us. To them, it is a serious problem. To them, it is a very real problem with very real consequences. For us, too, it should be a very real problem. And we can do something to help. After all, these are our grandparents. These are our parents. In 1991, statistics showed that 17% of all elderly people living alone were lonely too often. Not only that, a study which was published in 2008 in the International Journal of Geriatric Psychiatry concluded that not only was loneliness prevalent among the elderly, but that loneliness also was significantly associated with depression. Also, it was an independent risk factor for depression, and it could lead to deteriorated health and mental state. But more chilling than that was another study published in 2006 in the same journal, in which they concluded that the elderly suicide attempter was most likely a widowed woman suffering from social isolation, loneliness, and depression. Leanne Jackson is an RN who's worked with the elderly for the past 10 years. She says that there are many, many elderly people who every night pray to God that He will let them die. And she says that the reason why they do this primarily is because of loneliness. This is a significant problem with significant consequences for those that it afflicts. They have a need. They need us, and their need is great. Fortunately, each of us can do something to help alleviate the suffering caused by loneliness in the elderly. By visiting the elderly, we can help them to overcome these feelings of loneliness. We should visit those elderly people in our family first. We should develop strong relationships with them and visit them often. Not everyone is in a position where they can visit the elderly in their family, either because of death or distance, or perhaps you already do, but feel like you want to do more. To you, I say, visit the elderly in your community, develop relationships with them, adopt local grandparents, and visit them often. Sometimes we feel, and legitimately so, that there are certain things which cause us to feel uncertain about visiting the elderly. These obstacles, these very real obstacles, might prevent us from doing it, even if we feel like it's a worthwhile thing to do. For example, we might feel uncomfortable visiting the elderly. Perhaps we feel like we don't have any common ground. The truth is that common ground will come. We will build common ground as we visit them and as we share experiences with them. Perhaps we feel like we just don't have enough time. This, too, is a very legitimate concern, and the truth is that you will never have back the time that you spend visiting the elderly. However, it will be time well spent. In 2007, Thomas S. Monson, speaking at a devotional here at BYU, referred to two teenage men whom he saw visiting and caring for the elderly. He said to them, "What you have done today, you will ever remember. Your act of kindness reflects the nobility of your soul." It's important that we realize that a single visit, although it may do a little bit to assuage our own conscience, will do little to help the seniors who we're visiting. Leanne Jackson also talked about this, and she said that, unfortunately, in order for there to really be any benefit to the elderly, a single visit will not suffice. Indeed, what we need to do is we need to build relationships with them. Visiting once isn't enough. We need to visit often enough that we can come to know them and come to care for them, and they care for us, so that when we come to visit them, they're expecting us and happy to see us. Last Thursday, there was an Easter celebration at the assisted living center where Blanche lives. Well, hundreds of people attended. Families came and visited with their loved ones. Blanche sat in the lobby, hoping for a visitor, but no one came. Not a single person to visit her. Imagine the sadness that she felt that day. Imagine the loneliness that she felt day after day, not receiving a single visitor. Imagine the prayers of the elderly lonely at night as they pray to God to let them die. Now imagine a society where the elderly are not forgotten. Imagine a society, imagine a world where the elderly are able to feel happy in their later life, where we have relationships with them and they with us, where Blanche has someone who will take her to the temple and her life again has meaning and she no longer feels lonely. In conclusion, loneliness is a serious problem among the elderly, a serious problem with serious ramifications for those it afflicts. However, we can help by visiting the elderly, by visiting them frequently enough to form relationships with them and bond with them. As I have visited the elderly and grown to form relationships with them, I have seen the joy that it can bring to their lives. As I've come to the door and knocked, I see their face light up as they answer, realizing that someone is there to see them. And they tell me that it's made their day, or their week, or their month. Let us today resolve to be mindful of the elderly among us who are lonely. Let us today resolve to extend a helping hand and a loving heart, so that they, like Richard, can experience happiness in their later years.